Greetings, brothers and sisters. Another example of how desperate the liberal-leaning media Huffington Post is to defend their horrible president, right? Biden goes full dark Brandon in scathing impression of the Republican hypocrisy. And so this is just great. This is the Dark Brandon meme. I've showed you this before, right? This is their whole thing about Dark Brandon, which is horrible as a meme, right? Trying to take the F. Joe Biden meme, the Let's Go Brandon meme, and turn it into him as some sort of Terminator-like demon, and it matches his whole backdrop for that Philadelphia speech. So here is what he had to say, right? This is what they consider him going full Dark Brandon, and this is scathing.
Republican, not a single one, House or Senate, voted for that legislation.
They didn't vote for it.
We also passed once-in-a-generation investment in our nation's roads, highways, bridges, railroads, ports, airports, water systems, high-speed internet. We got a little help from Republicans, but not a lot, but enough to get it passed.
Not a lot. They didn't get much help from Republicans as they loot our country, right? You know, I said that this was whoever won, whether it was Trump or Biden, was going to be in charge of the going out of business sale of America and who got paid, because some people will, right? This is like when they buy a company and they break it up. And that's what's happening. They're looting America of what was left of its wealth, right? And,
But the truth is, there are a lot more Republicans taking credit for that bill than we actually voted for it.
Really? Name some names. Show us some video clips. Show us some articles, right? This is the scathing part.
I see them out there, and now we're going to build this new bridge here. We're all for it. And by the way, this new road, and we're going to have an internet that's going to be all the way. I love them, man. They ain't got no shame. They don't have any shame.
How dare you?
Breaking out.
How
You're
dare
breaking out.
you?
It's
How
all right.
dare
Settle
you?
down.
Anything
How
you
dare
want that,
you?
but the bottom line
How
is very
dare
clear.
you?
When you
How
cross
absolutely
the border
dare you,
illegally,
sir?
you
How
have
dare
given
you?
up the
How dare you be so flippant, man?
Well, we say, how dare they?
So that was the worst imitation. Let's watch it again.
I see them out there, and now we're going to build this new bridge here. We're all for it. And by the way, this new road, and we're going to have an internet that's going to be all the way. I love them, man. They ain't got no shame. They don't have any shame.
So they're so desperate. I mean, what kind of denial do you have to be to call that good? Now, I mock people all the time. So about, 20 to 30% of what I do here involves mocking, right? And the mocking's always there, so it's something I do. And I appreciate good mocking, right? I'm a fan of it, or whatever it is, jokes like this. And so I don't care who you are, what side of the aisle you're on. Trump is pretty good at it. And, he has some things that are funny. He's got some good funny stuff. But Jojo Magoo is horrible. This is horrible. You can't even call this mocking. It's pathetic. It's not based in reality. His imitation was, off. And he would have to, present them taking credit for this. And Republicans, so divided right now, Republicans aren't going to take credit for anything. Maybe if they're going to build a new bridge or whatever it is, right? But they're not going to, it's going to be used against them when they run for whatever position they're running for. And the Republican base doesn't want any, if you're a Republican and you vote for a Democratic bill and you live in a very, a very right-wing Trump area, then you're effed, right? And so they're not going to take credit for it. The whole thing is just, the premise isn't good. But even if it was a lie and he did a good job of mocking them, it would be almost acceptable. But for them to come out and say, Biden goes full Dark Brandon and scathing impression of Republican hypocrisy, he didn't go full Dark Brandon. He went full Trump. This is stuff that Trump does. He's been doing this for years. This is one of Trump's moves, right? And so they talk about how much they hate Trump. And they don't like when Trump does these things. But he's taking something from Trump's playbook. As much as they hate Trump, he's the one that generates the energy. Like, they're putting this out there and thinking it's newsworthy because it's what Trump does, right? I mean, they say they hate Trump, but they steal all the stuff. All the mainstream media steals our stuff in the truth community. Like, they can see what's working, they can see where the energy is, but they suck at it. They're never good at it, right? Democrats are stealing from Trump because it works, right? Not that I'm a Trump fan, but they secretly want to be him and love him, right? Like, they're saying how horrible he is, but when Brandon pulls a Trump, right? When JoJo Magoo pulls a Trump, they applaud him and talk about how he's scathing and he's going all full dark Brandon when he's just really being a Trump wannabe. They've talked about how mean-spirited Trump is and how when he does things when he mocks people, how mean he is, right? But when Brandon does it, when JoJo does it, they're slathering all over him because they aren't really against the behavior. And I've said this so many times. I say it to people in the truth community. People complain about a behavior. Like, I have Britney fans complain about a behavior when I'm mocking Britney, but they don't have they don't have a problem when I mock Cardi B, right? So you don't have a problem with the mocking. It's the subject, or it's who's doing it, right? You have a problem with the person who's doing it or the subject matter. But if the person's on your side and believes what you believe, yeah, the behavior's fine. Oh, that's great behavior. Yeah, go ahead, mock away. Look at he's going full dark Brandon. He's eviscerating him, right? Trump does it. Oh my God, he's so horrible. He's so unpresidential. Why is he, And so this is not just for the Democrats, but everybody. The Democrats, they're worse. They're worse than anybody else. Like, they're always thinking they're being more mistreated or whatever. But don't complain about the behavior. Just complain about what you're really upset about. That you think it's okay to treat Trump one way and JoJo Magoo another. And so you're a hypocrite, right? Like, you believe that some people, Republicans, can be treated one way and Democrats can be treated another way. Same thing with anybody, right? Don't complain about the way you're being treated and then say it's fine when somebody else does it to somebody else that you don't like, right? Rain check. Here they are. Look at this motley-looking crew, especially him, Prince Andrew. They really screwed Andrew with the photo. The changes King Charles III has in mind for the royal family. Pomp and circumstance and lots of gold. Reigning Charles proclaimed Britain's new monarch. There's his gold throne there. I mean, just the opulence. And when, there's so many economic issues and people can't pay their electrical bills. And you got this throne. Look at this, right? The crown and all the gold. I mean, just, and they're getting $40 million or more a year from the government taxes and all these things to support all their stuff that they do. And so, just embarrassing, right? Queen Elizabeth dies. What happens next? Her death marks the end of an era and sent shockwaves across the nation, while condolences stream in from across the world. King Charles III signals his new reign will offer a change of tone. As the United Kingdom mourns a beloved king, the nation is already wondering how King Charles III will reign and whether his monarchy will depart from the traditions of his mother. He's screwed. She was there for 70 years, right? She was the queen long before I was born. I mean, it's a long period of time. And so, she's the iconic queen, and the world has moved on from royalty across much of the world. And he isn't very well liked, right? And so, he's coming in. They don't like him. He's not good. He's not funny. All the stuff that happened with Diana. And a lot of people are over it. There's a lot of countries that are ready to move on past the monarchy. And he's out there, maybe they'll do better with William or whatever it is. But he's in for a rough ride, right? The View host Sonny criticizes Queen Elizabeth II for the crown of privileged jewels.
I studied in London, and so I lived in London for a while, and I got caught up in the pomp and circumstance of it all as well. I wanted to see the changing of the guards. I wanted to see
She was into London and the royal family.
everything. I wanted to meet the Queen because I think we all love glam and pageantry.
Not all of us. I never liked it at all. I don't have any interest in it. And many of us don't.
And I think, though, we can mourn the Queen and not the empire.
Yeah.
Because if you really think...
No, you can't, right? They're one and the same. She was God's representative on earth, according to British royal family. All this stuff, right? The murders, the wars, the sitting on gold thrones while people are starving in our country, the millions of dollars for the opulence.
About what the monarchy was built on. It was built on the backs of black and brown people. She wore a crown with...
Not just black and brown people. It was built on the backs of all the white people, the Irish, the Scottish people, all the peasants in England. It's not just... It's equal opportunity oppression. Because all those people in that country, all the, various conquered nations across the world, Chinese people, Asian people as well, Indian people, everybody, right?
Pillaged stones.
Native Americans, like they got into everybody. They extracted wealth from around the world.
From India and Africa. And now what you're seeing, at least in the black communities that I'm a part of, they want reparations. Barbados left the sort of this monarchy, this colonization. Yeah. Jamaica, I have a lot of Jamaican friends. That's coming soon. And right now, Charles now is in a position. I think has 14 colonies that he is now head of state, including Australia and Canada, I believe, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's all coming to an end. Charles is he's the exact kind of guy that you want to have the empire fall around, right?
It's time for him to modernize this monarchy, and it's time for him to provide reparations to all of those colonies. And
there's not going to be any reparations. Reparations would be admitting that they did wrong, and that never happens, right? And all those countries, every country she mentioned, had their own issues, right? With slavery, their own issues with abuse, their own issues with dominance. Human beings across the globe have taken slaves. Tribes took slaves. Aboriginal people took slaves. And so this is not just one group of people. They were just really good at it, right? And so it's not like there's ever going to be some sort of even apology. Like there won't even be an apology, some superficial one.
I also think, a monarchy, it's very easy to uplift one family. The harder thing is to uplift all families. And I think that he's in a position to do that.
You do know that Queen Elizabeth fought against apartheid in South Africa.
Oh, my God. You know that Queen Elizabeth fought against apartheid in South Africa. You know that, right? How can your name be Joy and have a voice like that causes so much pain? You know about that, right?
That was one of the good things she did.
She was, and she also was very angry with Thatcher, who refused to do sanctions against South Africa.
Yeah.
She's very angry with Thatcher. She was angry with Thatcher.
So she tried, I think, her best if she
She tried her best. Even though she tried her best.
could every once in a while. She really didn't have that much power. She was the figurehead.
She was a figurehead. She didn't have power, even though she could go anytime to Canada and close down their government. She owned more land than any other person around the world. She had tons of power. And if she was just a figurehead, then why does everybody care so much? Right? She's playing a role. She's not funny. She wasn't a good actress. She wasn't beautiful. She wasn't any of those things, right? She was acting like the queen. This is just a role she plays, and who cares? She's an actress who, got $40 million a year for the royal family and hosted all these decadent and unnecessary functions and had 6 castles and all this land, but she doesn't have any power. Then why do you care? Why are you talking about her then? She had the power, but she had no power to change and get rid of what the royal family was. But to be honest would be to say, I mean, they were cannibals 300 years ago, and they admitted to that. I mean, all the stuff, the Vlad the Impaler, the stuff I covered on my other channel yesterday. I mean, it's all those things. And so she had power. They would never admit what they really are, which is demonic, right? What they did was monstrous. There's no walking back from what they did. There's no godly person that would do what they did, right? There's no person who was, devoted to God and devoted to being a better person, or a person with a conscience and a heart. And I'm talking about multiple kings, the whole empire. And so it's basically condemning everything that was done before you. And that's never going to happen, because they would be admitting that it's all a frickin', I mean, they want to portray it as being something glamorous and something wonderful. All these movies with princesses and kings and queens. But everybody who says, oh, I'm a king, or, King James, or Beyonce saying she's a queen, or them saying that Britney's a queen, anybody who wants to think of themselves as a queen or a king, they're saying that they're pro-racist, because a king or a queen, it's based in your genetics. That's what makes you a king or a queen. Your genetics, your genetic line, right? And when you rule like that, as a monarch, I mean, everybody hammers Trump. They're worried about Trump being some sort of dictator or oligarch. But that's what a king is. That's what a queen is. And you can't hate Trump and then say, oh, wow, it sucks a queen left, right?
Look, the United States was built on the backs of black and brown
And
people.
we want our reparations.
And,
They wanted their reparations.
And, the Catholic Church was built on the backs of people who, black and brown people who were forced to convert to Catholicism.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that we're coming to terms with. And I think one of the things that Charles can do to get some popularity is maybe take some time away from speaking to his plants and speak to this issue.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what he's going to do. Why would you even suggest that? Are you completely unaware of what's going to happen? This issue's never going to happen, right? That's never going to happen, right? The people who run things don't admit they're wrong. Just like you guys at The View don't admit you're wrong, which is pretty much about everything, right? I mean, I agree with some of what Sonny said, because it's, things that I believe in my videos. But again, it's The View, right?
Recognize this issue.
We're speaking to who with the first?
Speaking to he likes to speak
And
to the
maybe
plants.
bring his
He's got
family
beautiful
back
plants.
together after the allegations of racism that have been made by Duchess Meghan Markle and her husband, his son, Prince Harry. Maybe they can address that as well.
They're not going to ever admit to that, and Meghan Markle's is a nightmare, right? I mean, Meghan Markle's there's just no way. That's not going to happen. And it didn't happen from him. She didn't say, where there was someone in the royal family or whatever it was. I mean, all those things. It's not going to happen. Because if they're going to own some of it, they got to own all of it. If they're going to admit to, what kind of family they actually are, then it starts, once you, poke a hole in that bag of rice, it all comes flying out eventually.
Well, I think when we asked the correspondent, what could he do that would be different, I think modernizing would be a smart step for him, purely because
The voices, why don't they get women with pleasant voices to listen to?
I think it's important to separate the queen from the monarchy and the empire, as you said, because I think sometimes that's conflated. And
Because it's the same thing. The queen is the monarchy. The queen is the throne. The queen, every decision she made was for the betterment of the family and the throne, the crown. I mean, these things. She's the crown, right? That's what it says in the show. You guys not watch the show? And the show does a good job of at least, getting an understanding of why she's made these horrible decisions, because they're decisions she has to make for the crown. It's not coming from what she believes. Like in the show, her sister wanted to marry some divorced guy, and she said it was okay. But the crown part of her, the part of hers that's the crown, the part of her that's a human being said yes. The part of her that said the crown said no, right? It's like,
was a little sad yesterday because I saw some posts and articles written about some things that people were tweeting, and one of them was awful. It was from a professor at Carnegie Mellon who said, "I heard the chief monarch of a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating."
Oh, man.
Oh, man, that's so horrible. Oh, the pain. You think about the pain the British family inflicted. I mean, they started slavery, right? Slavery's been around for, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, it's been, part of the human condition. But this last go-round of slavery, the African-American slavery here in America, that was started by the British, and it was under the rule of the king at that time, right? And so, I mean, they've got, and just so many other things, horrible things that they did and participated in, so many wars, so many other atrocities. Plus, they were cousin effers, right? They were cousin marrying people, right? They, this inbred family that, I wouldn't wish anything bad on anybody because I don't feel that way, right? Like but if it happens, I'm not going to be sad.
I thought, how do you answer? I mean, that is literally answering with such a hateful heart. And it wasn't the tweet almost more shocking was the tens of thousands of likes on that tweet.
It was crazy. All those people with those hateful hearts, and you guys in your Trump hate, right? It's okay to hate Trump, but not the Queen. Like, you just don't understand. The most racist thing is the royal family. Because it says, I've said this before, the genetic bloodlines are there to rule.
And to me, that was a moment where you're answering the very hate you reject with hate.
Well, that's why you
it's crazy. There's too much hate.
separate the Queen
It's important,
with the
but
empire
I
because
think people
there isn't a
conflate the
lie
two.
in the rest of that tweet. What did he say? He said
She said, a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating.
It was a thieving, raping, genocidal
but I think
empire.
Twitter took that tweet down because it violated its policies of wishing pain.
Yeah, and Carnegie Mellon also.
This is what happens on The View, right?
Because this is
you got to get Whoopi in there. Like, actually, I hate to say it, but Whoopi's like a gatekeeper to stop these things from going off the rails.
A professor that teaches young people. This is an educator and a leader. Mm-hmm. And the university said something important. Aside from this doesn't represent the values of the institution, they said, nor the standards of discourse we seek to foster, which is
Whoa, he's really getting to it here.
Important because this wasn't just a regular average citizen. This was an academic.
It was an academic person. It wasn't an average dum-dum who tweets on the internet. This person actually had a brain and had some credentials, had a job.
Leads our young
Sarah,
people.
one of the things we can't do is we can't tell people from, who've been colonized. We can't tell people who've been barbarized how to feel. And it's very difficult to understand it.
Okay, so I want to address what this woman just said, whatever her name is, and what Sonny said about reparations. My wife and I went looking for pawpaws today. Pawpaws is a type of fruit, very much like a banana, not like a banana, like a combination between a mango and a banana. It's very custardy. There's a variety of them. They grow wild. It's native to America. It's one of our sort of more exotic fruits. Very few people know about it because they don't sell well. Once they go ripe, they smush very easily and they can't store them. So it's not something that you can have in grocery stores. They're not commercially viable. I've known about them for a number of years. One of my neighbors at when we've had our second homestead, he not a neighbor but somebody who was knew a lot about homesteading, and there was someone in our area who had grown pawpaws, and this guy brought one over to our house, and we all got to taste one. And we have trees growing now in our homestead, but they're not old enough to bear fruit. So we heard about this place not far from here that has them growing out in the wild. We went to look for them. I'm going to talk about this more in the Journey series. I have a Journey series update to do probably tomorrow or Monday or something. But anyways, So I didn't get to finish this video. So I was thinking about this stuff with reparations. I was talking about it with my wife. And, when you start thinking about ancestral payback, right? When you think about people saying, all right, this one group of people did something atrocious to another group of people. For example, what Sonny was talking about was slavery, right? Which was 155 years ago. So that's about 3 generations of people. There's been at least 2 generations of people, really 3, since the last slave died, right? And so the people living today are 2 or 3 generations, 4 or 5 generations removed since they had an ancestor as a slave. The Native Americans, that's what? Since the invasion of America, the generations of Native Americans that were here when Europeans came in and basically committed almost a genocide here and took this country from the indigenous people. So Sonny's a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but I kind of understand law and, civil law a little bit, right? But what you're talking about is you'd have one group of people, some sort of, class action lawsuit against another group of people. And it isn't just blacks against whites, right? You understand this? You can't say it's, in terms of liability. For example, I would be considered a Caucasian person, but I have brown skin, like light brown skin, right? I don't have white skin, at least where the sun hits me, right? I'm part Italian, Sicilian, Irish, German, and Albanian. And my ancestors got here in 1915 or something like this, right? My grandmother was an orphan. I'm not sure if she came over with her parents or I don't know how she got to America. My maternal grandmother, and she was from Ireland. And my grandfather, he was came from Germany, and he fought in a couple world wars, right? So these are my direct ancestors. My grandfather, who was Sicilian, came over in 1916 or 17 or something like that, and so did his wife. And so they were early ancestors, immigrants to America, and none of them owned slaves in this country. So I have no ancestors, like many white people, don't have any ancestors that had anything to do with slavery, right? And there's lots of white people in the world that didn't have anything to do with the slavery that happened here in America, right? So if you're going to say all the black people are going to sue the white people, well, that wouldn't, there's no liability there, right? And so what you would have to find is the ancestors of slave owners, right? And it's complex because there's many African American people who have slave owners in their genetic makeup, their genetic line. Like, for example, when Thomas Jefferson was statutory R-ing Sally Hemings, his slave girl, when she was like 15, right? I mean, it was, not cool. And then he impregnated her with 3 kids, and those kids became his slaves, which is effed up, right? Those kids are now, they have the genetics of a slave and the genetics of a master in their system. And all their ancestors have some of a slave owner. They're going to have, ancestors who are both slave owners and slaves. So how do you work out reparations? It's like, can a person sue themselves, right? Sue their, you look at the complexity here of that kind of situation, right? Where people who are the ancestors of slaves also have slave owners in their genetic line. And so there's those complications. Because if you're going to say the people who are slaves get money from the people who are ancestors, their ancestors were slaves, get money from the people who were their ancestors were slave owners, that's a really big complex issue, right? Because how many years do you go back to where, how many generations do you go back to where you have to pay reparations for something your father did or your grandfather did? And what about all the people who were ancestors were slaves that have committed some sort of crime, right? Now, if your father killed somebody, do the ancestors of that man get to sue you, right? I mean, this is what you're talking about. Do we all have to pay Japan because the United States as a country as a whole bombed them with nuclear bombs, right? Or what about these wars that just have happened here? I was against those wars. Why should I pay for wars I don't agree with, right? But I benefited from those wars, as we all did. Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq. There's 1 million dead Iraqis. Do we all pay for them because of that? All of us benefited from that, right? Or what about the slave labor? Does everybody who has an iPhone get you don't have to pay reparations to the slave labor, the sweatshops, or everybody who shops at Walmart? Do we have to pay reparations to the people who are abused, who are providing our cheap products for us, right? In China and Pakistan and these, look at the labels. Go buy some cheap clothes at Walmart and look at the labels, and there are sweatshops in other countries that are making those items, right? And so there's so much wrong being done in the world, and just in terms of what are you responsible for, right? Are you responsible for what your government did? I mean, if we all think about the Native Americans, then everybody owns a home, everybody owns a land. Should we all give it back to the Native peoples and give them back the land? Then what do we do, right? As a country, and everybody who's benefited from the modern day system. Because if you're going to say, all right, reparations need to be paid because there were people who were yanked out of their homes in Africa, yanked away from their homeland and brought here to be slaves, is it, inherent that you return the conditions of what was there before, 5 generations later, right? When all the people who are slaves have now acclimated to the American modern day lifestyle. And so it's not like you would, create some circumstance where they could return. You could return the land to the Native Americans, and you could return the African American people back to Africa and restore their way of life and, the kind of, tribal situation wherever they were in beforehand, right? You understand this? Like, you would have to bring it back to the way it was. That would be the only way of doing reparations. You would have to, fix what was broken. You would have to return what was broken. So there's so much wrong being done in the world, and who's accountable for it, and then, I mean, if you're looking at it, all right, the reparations are being paid to this group of people, then this group of people has to pay reparations. Like, let's say we paid reparations to Japan for dropping an atomic bomb on them. They have to pay reparations back to us for Pearl Harbor, and they have to pay reparations back to China because they did, bad stuff to China. But before that, what happened? Like, what happened before that, or before any of these, I mean, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 5,000 years ago. There's no way that you could ever calculate that. And what are you going to do? It based in genetic lines, based in skin color, based in religion? I mean, how are you going to even attribute ancestral culpability, right? And if you're saying the American government owes people of color some sort of reparations, well, if you are receiving any sort of government assistance, if the government has given you money through health care or, food stamps or any other sort of bailouts or whatever it is, right? It's just giving you away money. And then you have this idea of, well, why do other taxpayers who are paying taxes have to pay for other people to receive money, right? I mean, there's all these complexities in this. And so there's no way to really get to the bottom of who's wronged who the most. I mean, you have all these different, various people have been abused and, have suffered at the hands of some other group of people, but there were Aboriginal slaves, right? Many of these various tribal cultures had slaves in Native American slaves and slaves in Africa that were long before the Europeans got there. And so you have all these things, right? And do those wrongs have to be compensated for? You understand this? And all of us have collectively benefited from the evil empire that is our country. Our country is extorting money, using military-industrial complex and manipulating governments and keeping the currencies, our currency more valued than other currencies. And so all of us are, culpable. We're all part of that, right? And so you can't really ever, the reparations is silly because there's no way to get to the bottom of it. There's all these issues with it. I mean, people say we're owed. Well, maybe your ancestors were owed. I mean, wrongs were committed, right? I mean, but in nature, when a snake goes in and kills the babies of a mother mouse, or the babies of a mother rabbit, or our dog Tulsi went in and killed 3 baby rabbits, right? Numerous times. Now are those rabbits? She owe them some sort of a debt? Like, well, how do you attribute any of that, right? Because we have a spiritual system. We have a spiritual system of past lives and future lives and accountability, where everything's accounted for on a spiritual level. You might not believe that, but I've, had multiple experiences of it myself, understanding it. And what if you were a slave in a past life, and now you're a white businessman in this life, right? And so, like, how does that factor into it? Because your soul was the soul of a slave in a previous life. Like Master Chargy, the third master of the Heartfulness system, he was Spartacus. He was, one of these, he had leg pains from being in chains in a life in like ancient Rome or Greece or whatever it is, right? And he was St. Paul in a past life as well. And the second master system, Babaji, was a beggar in a past life, which helped him in terms of his, attitude towards God. He approached God as a beggar, and so he had that experience. And so who's to say, what you were to other people in past lives and why things play out the way they play out, right? Because you could never really calculate justice on this planet. Somebody murders somebody, sure, you have, all right, there's some kind of punishment for them. But then what are the other contributing factors to something like that, right? Historically and then spiritually and the rest of it. Only somebody who has divine vision, who can see, hundreds of lives in the past and see what was done in the past and, over multiple incursions here on this planet and, all these things. And so, you can never bring justice or some sort of fairness into the human experience, no matter how bad people were treated by one group of people. And then 3 generations, you want to punish all the people like that, right? All the Americans that were, ancestors, not even in some cases. Like all white people are responsible for that, right? Like many of them, like you think about this, all right, so in terms of Great Britain, they invaded Ireland and Scotland. And they used to take the kids who spoke, I believe it's called Gaelic, right? Irish, the Irish language, Gaelic. And if they spoke their native tongue, they would beat them until they all eventually spoke English only, right? And so they were, a form of slaves, servants. They took their land, prima noctis, this first right, the right of first night. The Lord could go and basically the newlywed bride and impregnate her, hopefully for them, and infuse her with some of the genetics of England, right? I mean, all these types of things. So that's Irish people who are white. Scottish people suffered similarly, right? All these European countries that were invaded and went back and forth. And again, like who's responsible for that? The suffering that now exists in Ireland and Scotland from British rule. And so there's, this is white on white crime. Caucasian on European, Caucasian on European, Caucasian. So there's all these complex factors, right? And so do the British pay them off? And you think about the difference in, there wasn't even currencies at that time. So how do you calculate the damages, right? How much should the reparations be? It's a ridiculous idea. And you're benefiting from the American system. All these rich people, they're on The View, right? They're all doing well financially. You want all the advantages and privileges that the evil empire gave to you, right? And Sonny Houston, or whatever her name is, she is light skinned. So she has white genetics, right? And so, how does she talk about reparations when she might have the genetics of a slave master or something in her system, right? Like ancestors who are I mean, abusive. So, I mean, it's like, again, there's no way. It's just, it's just one of these ridiculous ideas. It's very divisive because everybody thinks they're a victim, right? White people think they're victims, that Trump is saying, oh, you're being victimized or taken away your country or whatever. And the people of color, you're owed something from what happened to you and and it was atrocious slavery, brutal slavery. I'm not minimizing the effects and the negativity of the slavery, right? But everybody has these stories. Everybody suffers things like this, abuse from the system and peoples, other peoples, right? I have had wrongs done to me, unfair things, and I just work to be grateful for them and believe there's spiritual benefit to them. And that's how I approach it, because otherwise you're just resentful and miserable, and you're trying to exact something that's never gonna. It's never going to be fair, and there's never going to be justice, right? You're never going to get back, whatever was taken from you in terms of your life force, in terms of, whatever it might be, right? If you have, some sort of legal matter, then sure. If there's a crime committed, you could use the legal system, but that sucks, That doesn't work, most of the time anyway. But if you look at it like God has a plan, there's some sort of divine plan, then, it gets a little bit better. It gets a lot better. You just accept that this is part of the plan, as sucky as it is, that there's some sort of, justice at the end of it. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.